Okay, Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. Good to see you all. Welcome. And let's see if I can spotlight my video. And let's get going. Okay, so we are ready to begin a new Parsha this week. And as we know, as we mentioned last time, we're kind of skipping over a week because last Sunday we spoke about the last Parsha, Bezos HaBracha. And this Sunday, we are already speaking about Noach, which is the second Parsha. And that is because we read the first Parsha, Bereshit, yesterday on Shabbos. Because we did not read Bezos HaBracha on Shabbos, we read it on Simchas Torah, which was on Wednesday. So we studied the last Parsha from Sunday through Wednesday, and then we studied the first Parsha, Bereshit, from Wednesday through Shabbos. And now we are already moving on to the second Parsha. So what I want to do, I want to give a general overview of both parshas. So we kind of we don't get ahead of ourselves. We know what's going on, and what's interesting is that obviously Bereshit, the first parsha, is such a heavy, there's such a deep, and so much to the parsha, but it's also it spans over 10 generations. So it's not like, hey, I just missed a few episodes in someone's life, but you missed 10 generations of history and lessons from the parsha. So just to give a general overview, I don't have the good Chumash as I usually have, but obviously it's Bereshit 1:1, beginning of the Torah. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. The Torah goes through the 6 days of creation, what God created each of the 6 days. And on the seventh day, he rested. Obviously, we know that we have Shabbos for the same reason, to remind us and to strengthen our belief that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Perhaps at a different opportunity, I think in the past we have discussed some of the other theories of creation or the beginning of the world, how that fits or could that fit with the Torah's version, which we obviously believe is the correct version. The world was created by God in 6 days, etc. The Torah, after creation, talks about the first human being, Adam, and his wife, who was created from his rib, from his thigh, or from him. Eve, Chava, Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. Their story, we know the famous story of the sin of the tree of knowledge, where God put them into the Gan Eden and told them that they should eat from any tree, but don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And we have the Nachash came and convinced Chava to eat from the fruit, and she gave to her husband as well. They sinned and they ate from the fruit, and because of that, humanity, the world as we know it, has changed, and he was cursed. He was punished for this. He was sent out of Gan Eden, and with the Torah continues with the children that he had, Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel, and the dispute that he had over a sacrifice, a offering that he gave to God, and Cain killed Hevel, and later, 7 generations later, Cain was killed by his own grandchild because of the punishment for him killing Hevel. And then the Torah basically continues with going through the generations from Adam all the way to Noach, and that's where we open in this week's Parsha the story of Noah, or Noach, as it is in Hebrew. The truth is, Noach is already born in the end of the Parsha Bereshit, and he is a special person. Noach, his name, as you know, there's always meaning in the name. The name Noach connotes comfort. There's quite a few Hebrew names, by the way, that has the same root. If you used to know someone with the name of Noah, or someone with the name of Menachem, you know someone with the name of Menachem? Speaking to one, right? Menachem. My name is Menachem Mendel. Menachem also means to comfort. There's a woman's name, Nechama. I know someone here whose, I guess, grandmother would be Nechama. Nechama means also to comfort. Nachman, like Nachmanides, to comfort. There are many names that have the same root, to comfort. And Noach, his name was Noach, to comfort, because he was born, and he saw right away he's special. He will bring comfort. He will bring help for those who are working the field. He was able to invent different types of shovels and things like that that help them instead of using their hands, their bare hands, to plow, to work the field. But he was able to create and build some tools to help them out, and various other reasons why he has the name of comfort. But this week's parsha opens. This is the second parsha of Bereshis, or chapter 6 of Genesis of Bereshis, verse 9. And the parsha opens up. Elah told us, Noach, these are the offspring, these are the children of Noach. And right away, the Torah does something which is seemingly uncharacteristic for God. What's uncharacteristic for God? God starts to praise Noach, gives him some praises, almost like, hey, such a special person. What does he say? Noach ish tzaddik. You want to know who Noach was? Noach was a tzaddik. Noach was a righteous person. Tamim, he was complete, he was whole, he was sincere. B'doyrosav, he was in his generation. As for Lekim Yisadach, Noach always walked in the way of God. Wow, I wish you'd say that about me. It's a beautiful praise that God can say about a person. And what's interesting is that we don't find this praise about anyone else in the entire Torah. One other person, Joseph. Later on, Joseph, we mentioned once, Joseph was a tzaddik. Joseph was a righteous person. But other than that, we know, right? Let's keep it between us. We know that there were many righteous people in the Torah. Meaning, what comes to mind? Moses. Was Moses a righteous person? Of course. Who questions that? The Torah does not mention, not even once, that Moses was a righteous person. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. There are many righteous women in the Torah. There's no mention of the word tzaddik. How many times did my mother tell me, oh, what a tzaddik you are? What? But God does not mention it about anyone. And in fact, just in these generations, there were many righteous people. In fact, it's something very interesting to read up about their stories. We had mentioned in last week's parsha a man by the name of Misushelach. He was the man who lived the longest. Misushelach, right? The Torah almost mentions nothing about him. But the Midrash talks about him. And he says that he was actually a very righteous person. And in fact, God postponed the flood by a number of days because he passed away and people were sitting Shiva. So he postponed. He was obviously a righteous person that in his merit, his generation lived another few days because he was such a righteous person and his family was sitting Shiva. No mention about tzaddik. We have a man in this last week's parsha by the name of Chanoch, which, by the way, the word Chanoch also means to comfort. It also means to educate. But he was a righteous person as well. And the Torah actually does not even mention that Chanoch died. All it says is Chanoch isn't here with us. He isn't here. And it's explained because Chanoch didn't actually die. Chanoch went up to heaven like Elijah the prophet. Such a righteous person that death was not able to overcome him. They're beautiful people, rich lives. The Torah does not mention tzaddik. The Torah chooses to use the word tzaddik, righteous person, specifically for Noach. And the big W is why. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that question. Why by Noach specifically? But just to continue our recap of the parsha, so it speaks about Noah's three sons, Shem, Cham, and Yafes. And the generation, the situation at his time was a very, very terrible time to live, a corrupt, immoral time. His generation just was not, did not have any moral compass. They did not have any values. And it was each for their own, and it was extremely disappointing. Just imagine that. You build an empire, you raise a family, you create a company with morals and values. You work so hard on it. And then you look at the result. You say, Oy gewalt. What's going on over here? No one's following the rules. It's a disaster. What do we have to do? We have to press reset, right? We're just going to start over. And this is what God says. God says, listen, 10 generations into this world I created, I had a plan, I had a vision, and it's just not working. It's just not happening. It's not working. I have to press reset. I have to start over. And that's what he does. He tells Noah, listen, you are a right person. You are a special person. You're my man. I could trust you and your family, but no one else. No one else. It's gotten out of hand. I need you to help me. Noah, I need your help. What do I need from you? I need you to make for me a teva, an ark. And he goes through the exact measurements of the ark and the material that should be used and how it should be designed, the 3 floors and everything that involved in the teva. And you should preserve the animals. So you should take from every species 2 of non-kosher and 7 of the kosher and bring them into the teva with you. And that's what Noah does. He builds an ark. It actually takes him many, many, many years. Imagine how many years it takes him to build an ark. We're dealing now with building fences. We're all rebuilding our fences after the hurricane. How many of us have even, gotten to it, cleaned up the fence, or even made that phone call to figure out, what to do? We're procrastinating. Noah took him a while as well. How long did it take him? It took him 120 years, a lifetime. Now Noah lived for many hundred years, as people in those generations lived, but 120 years it took him to build an ark, and he was hoping maybe people will, maybe finally I'll make it into the paper. Maybe I'll make it into the news. Hey, you have the Sugar that was building an ark for 120 years. Why is he building an ark? People, passersby will stop by and say, hey, Noah, what are you doing? I've been here 10 years ago. You've still been building an ark, We have someone in our shul who makes fun of, sometimes when organizations are building a building, it takes them 120 years. But when you walk by and you see a big sign goes up, okay, we're starting construction. There's a Walgreens that's going to be built over here. Come back 3 weeks later, the Walgreens is open. Everything's on the shelves are stacked, right? It's ready. 3 weeks, you got a Walgreens. But for Noach, it didn't take 3 weeks. It took 120 years. Now he was a one-man show. Obviously, he was pulling all the lumber himself, and he was building it himself. But still, and the idea was he was trying to influence. It was not successful, but he was trying to influence his nation, his generation, to say, hey, listen, wake up and smell the coffee. I'm building an ark. God is sending you a message. He's going to destroy you. Maybe repent. Maybe change your ways. But did it work? And after 120 years, he finally has his ark. And God tells him, beginning of chapter 7, again, throws in a compliment. He throws in another phrase. And God says at the beginning of verse 1 in chapter 7, God spoke to Noach, and he told him, Boy Ato, come, you and your family, come into the teva. Which is interesting, right? God didn't say, go into the teva, go into the ark. What did God say? Boy, come to the ark. What does that mean? God is going with you. I'm coming with you. Come with me into the ark. Right? Go means, hey, I'm here, you go there. Right? Hey, go to the store, go and pick something up. Come means let's go together. God says, I'm with you in the ark. Come. You find that language again with Moses, by the way, when Moses went to Pharaoh. It doesn't say go to Pharaoh, it says come to Pharaoh, right? Because God is going with Moses to Pharaoh. But here he throws in another phrase. He says, come to Pharaoh, you come to the teva, to the ark, you and your family. Because I've seen that you are a tzaddik, you are a righteous person, and therefore I want you to come and save yourself and your family. And then the story continues that he goes into the table, his whole family and all the animals, and there was a mabul, there was a flood. God brings a flood, and there was for 40 days and 40 nights, the waters from above, the waters from below, basically flooded the entire world, entire earth, and everyone died. And the story continues how the ark protected them and was floating on the water, and eventually it dried up. And the parsha continues how Noah sent out the bird to find out if there's time to come out. God eventually told him to leave the ark. He leaves the ark, and we have the rainbow where God says, "Listen, I did this once. I'm not going to do it again." And obviously, there's lots of significance to the idea of water, the idea of purification, and how this changed the character of the world. And now it's not a top-down relationship with God, it's a bottom-up relationship with God. So now we have the tools that we need not to fail, because now we can make this relationship ours, and it could actually last. And that was the idea of the flood. And after Noah leaves the flood, we have the story where he planted a vineyard and he got drunk over the wine. And we have that story where, unfortunately, one of his sons did not behave properly with his father, and the other ones did protect their father, and for that they were blessed, and the other one was punished. And then the end of the parsha, we talk about many of the offspring and the next generations after Noah, all the way to Abraham, which was 10 generations later, and he's the next person. Next week's parsha we deal with Abraham, and we also have the quick story, which is a story we have to really understand, but the story of the tower of Babel, where the people fought with each other. They wanted to build a tower to fight God, and eventually God caused them to fight each other, and for that they were all punished. Okay, so that is a recap of the parsha. We'll take a little coffee break. Okay, so let's just talk about a few pointers over here. There's so much to talk to in these parshas, so that they're filled with each line. It could be studied for itself. But just a few points talking about this praising, the praising of Noah. They say there's a little child. We'll call him Moshe. Moshe, a little child. His mother's a real Jewish mother, always hugging and kissing and praising and loving her child. And Moshe turns, whatever it is, 4 years old, 5 years old. Finally, he's going to school on the school bus for the first time, very excited. And the mother is standing by the school bus and says, "Tatale, mamale, my love, all the praising, all the affectionate phrases. Please, I'm sure you'll enjoy school. Let me know how it goes. Behave nicely, everything." Moshe goes to school, comes back after school. The mother comes waiting, gives them a big hug and says, "Mama, tell me, how was it? How was school?" She says, "Mommy, the one thing I learned in school is that my name is actually Moshe." He never heard his name from his mother because the mother's always showering him with praises. But the point is that the Torah doesn't throw away. It doesn't use praises like the Torah praises someone. We find, like I said, there's so many righteous people. The Torah really praises them. And here we find time and again that the Torah is praising Noah. So what is up with these praises? So let's kind of analyze it. Now, perhaps we'll see some interesting and powerful lessons in our with first know that right to say certain things and there's the wrong time to say certain things. At certain times, a person needs a praise. At certain times, now's not a good time to mention it, right? And say the right place or the right time, and it can be a disaster, right? You have to know the right time You go to a shiva home, you have the right thing to say then. By a wedding, a happy occasion, you say something. When they're alone, you say one thing. When with your other people, you say something else. When you're speaking to someone directly, you say one thing. When you're speaking about a person, not directly, you say something else. Right? There are many things about the timing. Just one interesting point about the timing. In the opening part, in the opening verse, it says that Noach was ish tzaddik, a righteous person. Tamim, he was complete and sincere, and he would walk before God. It's a beautiful phrase. But later in verse 7, in chapter 7, when God is talking directly to Noah and telling Noah, instructing him to go into the Teva, it says, I've seen that you are a tzaddik, you are a righteous person. We don't mention that he's also a tamim, also a complete and wholesome person. So Rashi right away explains all about the timing. When you're speaking about someone, then is when you really want to praise the person. But when you're speaking directly to the person, it's always nice to praise them. People, it's nice to give them a nice compliment. But it's actually sometimes we say that when you're speaking to the person directly, only say part of their praise, because sometimes people are like, hey, well, uncomfortable, and the praise me right in front of me, right? My eulogy, you praise me. The point is that sometimes it's almost expected to say less of the praise in front of the person and more of the praise when they're not in the room, right? That's something we learn from Noah as well. But here's another interesting point. The other interesting point is last week's Parsha, we also mentioned Noah's birth and Noah's giving birth. And Noah lived many, many hundreds of years. He was at the age of 500, the Torah tells us. 500 years old, he gave birth to his to be sons. For 500 years, I'm sure he was a righteous person. I'm sure he did many righteous things. The Torah does not mention him being a righteous person up until this week's Parsha. Why? And there's a lesson in that. We know obviously everything, especially in these where there's so much history being told. Seemingly, we should just know where we come from. But no, Torah in Hebrew means a lesson. Everything in the Torah is a lesson. The Torah chooses what to tell us about history because these specific incidents, these are what we need to know, and they are a powerful lesson in our lives today. So what is the lesson for the fact that Torah mentions praise of Noah only in this week's Parsha? We're talking about the flood, etc., and not in last week's Parsha. We speak about Noah himself, his birth, and his youth. So one of the explanations given, and this is something when we talk about the Modeh blessing, that we thank God for turning our soul within me. And that is, Noah perhaps was an ordinary person. Noah is given a task to build an ark, save yourself and your family from this major, major hurricane that's coming. And the Ida and the Katrina, double, triple, 1,000 times. A flood is coming. There are no levees. There are no pump stations. There's no FEMA. There's nothing. This is the flood that's going to come destroy the entire planet. And you're going to be saved. You should try influencing others to be saved. Noah needed that confidence. He needed that confidence that I could do it. He lacked. It's not easy. Who am I? Who am I? So what does the Torah? Noah, you're a tzaddik. You could do it. Those words weren't only that we should know generations later. You should know who Noah was. Noah was a tzaddik. Okay, nice. So there are many, many righteous people in the Torah. We don't mention that they were a tzaddik. Over here, it's a lesson to how to empower a person. God wanted to empower Noah. Noah, you're a tzaddik. You're a tamim. You're a person who is complete. You could do it. You have the ability. You have the ability within you. We believe in you. imagine a child who hears that from a parent. A child who maybe does not have the best qualities to be successful in school. Maybe they do struggle. It is difficult to get a good grade on their test. It's not easy for them to. And a parent says, Moshe, you could do it. Just work hard. I'm sure you can do it. It's not that hard. I believe in you. That builds the confidence, and that itself gives them the ability to be successful. We say every morning, Moda ani lefanecha, thank you, God, for returning my soul within me. Your faithfulness is great. And one of the explanations to that last sentence, to that last comment, your faithfulness is great, is that we're saying that not that my faith in God is great, but God's faith in me is great. Every morning we tell ourselves that God has faith within me, and God knows that I am able to make this day a successful day. Oh, I have such a difficult time. I have this struggle and this challenge. I know I have a meeting today. I'm so nervous about it. I have to deal with that issue. I'm not sure how it's going to work out. I feel like I'm incapable. I feel like I don't have the tools. I'm a failure. I can't be successful. What do we say? God knows that Lynn or Michael or Brian or Sandy or Marty or Lance or Randy or whoever else is living, each and every one of us, your God says, I have faith within you. You are a tzaddik. So it's all about the time. It's all about the timing. When does God mention Noah? Not earlier when he was having a. Now when God was about to tell him, hey Noah, you have to build an ark. Now God says, I know this Noah guy. He's gonna have a difficult time with this endeavor. Now I'm telling you, Noah, you're a tzaddik. You're a righteous person. You can do it. I think that's a powerful lesson, how to empower other people. We have the ability, but we think we don't have the ability. So we have to bring it to the surface and tell the person, you could do it. That itself. And sometimes we think like, yeah, well, a few words, what difference can it make? But yes, that makes a big difference. We know with ourselves and of course with others. So think about the other person and say, yes, it's beautiful. You can do it. It might be hard. I'm sure you can do it. You believe in you. That itself can make a person successful. So that is point number one. That is point number two. Point number two is something very, very interesting, how the sages grapple with this idea of the personality of Noah. The Torah mentions he's a righteous person. But for some reason, it's questioned. Is he really a righteous person? Now, who would question what God says in the Torah? But the Torah throws in an interesting word. In this verse, in verse 9, the first verse of the Parsha, chapter 6, verse 9. The Torah says that Noah was a righteous person. But then the Torah says the word Idorosav, which means generation. That Noah was righteous in his generation. Now, we know that no word in the Torah is extra. The Torah is very specific with their words, with its words. Why Noah righteous in his generation? Well, when else would he be righteous? In the previous generation? In the next generation? If I say, you're a great guy, of course, in your generation, and who else? Now, amongst us, you're a great guy, right? Why is the Torah emphasizing that Noah was a righteous person? Do you know when? In his generation. So because of this extra word, there's an interesting maybe dispute or different explanations for Bidaros. Some say he didn't live in a time when it was easy. He didn't live in a time of King Solomon, a time of Moses, time of Abraham, a time when the world was kind of ready for it. The world was helping him. It was easy. It was simple. You just that's not when he was a righteous person. You know when he was a tzaddik in his generation, when it was so corrupt, when it was so difficult, and it was so easy to just go with the flow. It was so easy to get influenced by your surroundings. And he was able to stand up and go against the current. Oh, he must be a righteous person. He must be a righteous person. You could only imagine how righteous he would have been if he was living in another generation. He would have been even more righteous. His generation, it wasn't easy to be righteous. Wow, that's adding to the praise. Okay, that's one explanation. But what's appalling, or what's surprising, is the other explanation that the sages give. The other explanation is they say, Noah, he wasn't that big of a righteous person. Yeah, in his generation, he was a righteous person. If he was living with Abraham, if he was living with Moses, living with King David or King Solomon, who would even know him? Who would even know him? He would just be one of many. In his generation, there was no one else. There was no one else. He was the best of the worst, right? He was a right. So the Torah is telling us we get too excited about Noah because he was a righteous person, but it was only in his generation. So it didn't take much. And if you read this, the question is really? Like, why down a praise? No, wait, are you able to see me well? The video is working? How's my video?
It's freezing a little bit.
Off and on.
I don't hear you. In and out? I'm sorry. Okay.
The video is good. The audio is in and out.
Are we good now? You hear me?
Yeah.
Both the video and the audio are choppy.
Is that only, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
You don't want to do. I think mine. I want to, like, yeah.
Not sure if you're able to hear me or am I frozen?
Look at on your Wi-Fi. Maybe overloaded the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
I don't know if any house is doing anything.
Sorry about the freezing. We're going to just conclude. I'm on my phone. And hopefully we'll have record for those. Hopefully the recording is going well and we could have your people call that as well. Let's just conclude the thought. And the idea is that why are we trying to downplay? Why are we trying to downplay the righteousness of Noah? And actually, in this itself, there's a powerful lesson. And this itself is a powerful lesson. What is that? Noah was just a regular, ordinary guy. Perhaps he wasn't the major righteous person. But that makes him so relatable. When we are listening or reading the stories of Abraham, of Isaac, of Moses, of King Solomon, these are giants. These are people who sometimes we feel like, what do I have in common with this person? What do I have in common? I should learn their life. I'm just a regular guy. I'm a simple person. I have average qualities. I can never be a Moses. I can never be one of these great giants in the Torah. So the Torah said, listen, one time, many years ago, there lived a man by the name of Noah. Noah was a righteous person in his generation, meaning he wasn't a righteous person. He wasn't a giant. He didn't have extraordinary qualities. He was a regular guy, the regular guy, your neighbor down the block who mows the lawn and does the shops in the supermarket just like you do. A regular person, ordinary person, has a regular education just like me and you. That's what Noah was. In his generation, he was considered a tzaddik. But in other generations, no one will know him. No one will look at him. But let me tell you, the Torah tells you what Noah accomplished. A regular, ordinary person, but someone who believed in themselves. Someone who realized that I'm a regular person, but I can make a major impact. I can make a difference. If I just do what's right. If I say, I'm not going to go with the current. I'm not just going to do what everyone else is doing, but I'm going to stand up for what I believe in. That itself, that one little thing that you decide to do, that can have a major impact. And that is who Noah was. He wasn't a Moses. But we don't need a Moses for our lives. We need someone who we can relate to, someone like a Noah, and say, we can make a difference. Like we said, everything is an important lesson. It's a powerful lesson. We're not just telling you the story of Noah to know the history. Hey, once upon a time, there were floods. By the way, there were other floods that the Torah doesn't even mention. There was another flood earlier on, a few generations, that also destroyed 2/3 of the world. But you know what? That obviously isn't a very important lesson for us. The Torah does not mention it. This story of Noah is an important story for us to learn from. And one of the major ideas right at the beginning, the fact that we're emphasizing that Noah wasn't a major righteous person. He was only righteous in his generation, but all it took was for Noah to say, I can make a difference. My little action could have a major impact on the world around me. And that is what we have to say to ourselves as well. We don't have to be major righteous people. We don't have to be a Moses to make a difference. We could be a little Noah for our one little action. If we believe in ourselves, and like we mentioned earlier, God believes in us. Rabbo Emunah Sechel, we say every morning, God has faith in us that we can make a difference. And if we just believe in that and do that one little action that perhaps you feel like, what is it worth? What difference can it make? Yes, we can make a major impact.
Mendel.
I want to conclude with a story. And perhaps some of you have seen this in the news. This was back in August, 2 months ago. We're up in New York. It was a little child, a 6-year-old child, by the name of Yosef Shapiro. And he was lost. He was on a camp trip, some park, I forget the name of the park, near the Atlantic Ocean. And the bus is left. For whatever reason, he was left behind. A 6-year-old child. They obviously rushed to the scene. They rushed back to the area where the campers were. They start searching for him. They can't find him. They start announcing and mentioning his name. Yosef, come. We have pizza for you. We have ice cream for you. Tati's looking for you. Please come out. They're searching and searching and searching. No avail. They can't find him. And this is during daylight, but they see it's getting dark. It's getting dark. And it's not the most safe. It's a big park. And it's not far from the water. It's marsh. There's a lot of marshland over there. And God forbid it, a young child, especially in the dark, we don't know what's going to be. Might fall into the water. They can't see where they're walking. Who else is there in the park? It's obviously very dangerous. And you also have, it's getting dark. And it's also starting to rain. And little Yosef is lost in this area. And they can't find him. The community gets together. They have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers searching for Moshe. There's a man by the name of Victor Shine. By the way, Victor Shine once wrote a song called "The Minion Man." It's about how he went to Mobile, Alabama once, and he was a ninth for a minion. It's a funny, actually, a very interesting song. But that was back in the 80s. But Victor Shine, he's in his 50s, and he saw on social media that there's Joseph Shapiro lost, hundreds of people searching. He was after a day's work, and he's not any, whatever. He felt like, what went through his mind is there are so many young guys out there searching for him. I'm sure they'll find him. He's going to stay in the comfort of his home and, go through his evening routine. But then he started thinking, you know what? I have a 6-year-old grandson. Imagine this was my 6-year-old grandson. What would I want people to do? I would want every single person out there searching for him. So he had his long rain boots, puts on a white shirt so he should be able to be seen in the dark. And he goes out, and he sees that there is hundreds of people, there is man, whatever it is, he doesn't know what to do. He said, he's just going to go out on his own. He starts walking. It's raining outside. It's dark. He's not sure exactly where he's going. He has a few younger people following behind him with these small little flashlights. And he starts walking through the park, through the marsh almost. And he's screaming, Yosef, we're here for you. Todd is looking for you. Have treats for you. Come out. And he's going around for about an hour or so. And suddenly he hears Tati. He turns around to the youngsters behind him and says, do you just hear that? Yeah, we heard something. We heard someone say Tati. And then they started calling Yosef. No answer. So right away, he calls one of his friends who was running this whole command center. He calls him to tell him that he has a lead. Calling, like 6 or 7 tries. Finally, he answers. He says, I think I might have heard someone say Tati, but now that I'm answering, it's in the marsh. I can't go in the marsh. I'm too old for that. But I think maybe we have the vicinity. So right away, they bring out all the big trucks, the big lights and everything. And moments later, they were able to find him. They found Yosef. He was 25 feet from the Atlantic Ocean. It was at night. It was raining. He was hiding. He was kind of sitting under a tree. They saved him, but thank God he was healthy. Later, this Victor Shine, related, his thoughts and what went through. And he says, "Well, really, the lesson that he learned from the story is that he was thinking, there's so many people who are more than he is to do this job." But then he felt, who am I, right? But then he felt, no, each and every one of us has to say, I can make a difference, right? So I'll go out. Will I be successful? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But let me do my part. He was a little Noah of our generation. And this is the lesson that the Torah tells us. You don't have to be someone with extraordinary qualities like a Moses. We have to be who we are with our qualities and knowing our qualities and say, you know what? I'm just going to do one little action. I'm just going to push myself a little bit to make a major impact. So that is a little thought for this week's Parsha. I hope you enjoy. And I'm sorry about the choppy connection. I will post later the recording of this so you could hopefully the recording came out clearer so you can watch it over there. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good week, Shavua Tov. Hope to see you next week.
Thank you.